For the past 15 years or so, I have been all in on the Mac, hence my main channel, iCaveDave, where I talk Apple, but over the past couple of years, I've also got way back into my old Warhammer 40,000 hobby, but the vast majority of those games only run on Windows, so this Mac guy needs to roll up his sleeves and get building, on a budget. Oh, and let's make it a Warhammer 40k PC. For the OMNISIAH. And I'm a huge fan of what the guys do over on Nerdforge, so I'm going to go a little bit over the top, Skjera Bagera style, on this one. Let's make Martina proud. Happily, I had a PC tower in the attic. Unfortunately, at this point, it was pretty ancient, having been given to me about 6 years ago, once it was basically obsolete to the original owner. I mean, I'm no PC expert, but it's packing an optical drive and the power supply is at the top. That's not normal these days as far as I know. But it's big, it seems like I can pull it apart pretty easily, and it's nice and metal, and there's lots of room in it. But as I say, this build will be as much about having a grimdark look as it is about the hardware on the inside, if not more so. So I took a photo of it and grabbed the iPad to sketch over the top. Now, if you don't know anything about Warhammer 40,000, it is a grimdark setting with a neo-gothic look. Think industrial cathedral horror movie, and you're not too far off. So the idea is exactly that, an industrial, grimy, cathedral-looking thing. Cathedral to the God Emperor of mankind, although I'd also like to have a window in the side so that you can see, like with many modern PCs, the interior, and then we can make the inside fun as well. I don't mean incredible cable management and RGB lighting, but more on that later. So here's the rough idea, now to transfer it onto the box itself and see what sort of scale we're talking about. Then we can get started on building this case. Now, while I pull this thing apart and get some primer onto the case, what kind of games am I looking to play? So the main one is Dawn of War, which released 22 years ago in 2004. Damn, I'm getting old. Happily, there's been a definitive edition released last year that tidies up the game's graphics just a little bit and allows you to zoom out a little bit further and fixes some of the balance issues. Also, Space Marine 2 has been massive over the past year or so, but it takes a bit more power to play than the vintage games that I used to be able to play on my boot-camped iMac. That being said, I'm not looking for huge refresh rates, as I typically play on a TV or now my projector, and honestly, I can't even see the difference between a 6-year-old iPhone 12 on 60Hz and 120Hz ProMotion today. Old eyes, I guess. Plus, we're building on a budget here, as you can see from this vintage case. I'll be using a mix of AliExpress parts and used parts, but more on that in a little bit. The front plate of the case has been by far the most work. I built out the general shape using foam board, which is basically drywall for modelling, 2 paper surfaces around an easily snappable foam core, and it makes it super quick to build with, but that foam really doesn't stand up to solvents like spray paints or superglue, CA glue. What does work very well though is a nice little layer of PVA glue to seal it first, and then you are all good. The other big job here is chopping a hole in that one side, and this case is metal, so not quite sure whether it's aluminium, it could be steel, but I drilled a few holes in it and then took the jigsaw to the thing, and it shook around like crazy trying to drag the blade out, but we got there. Obviously this left some sharp, mean looking edges, so I took some paper drinking straws, split them down the middle with a craft knife and wrapped them around the edges like pool noodles to protect them. And then I had a little bit of perspex that I was able to slam on the inside to give it a window. And yes, of course, there will be stuff to look at inside, so should we talk about the PC stuff itself finally? Now, don't get too excited, but if you're looking to do a budget PC, this might actually be a pretty helpful guide for a vaguely balanced build. So I started with a bit of research on YouTube and found that a lot of recommendations, if you're not looking to build a cutting-edge system, was to build around an X99 board with old Xeon chips. Yeah, that sounded expensive to me too, but I was wrong. AliExpress is not something I'd used before, but lots of channels I'd watched were talking about building super budget gaming builds using one of these things, and honestly, it was a pretty great deal. The combo that I bought was a Machinist X99 motherboard with a Xeon E5 2630 V4, which meant nothing to me at the time, and doesn't mean a lot more to me now. But that also came with 16GB of DDR RAM, and the motherboard itself, and the chip, for £59 and 7 pence, shipped. Now, I have no idea if this was the best of the options available to me, as so many of these are built from salvaged chips and CPUs from older systems, but hey, For the value, I don't think it's half bad. It's a 10-core, 20-thread server CPU that can turbo up to 3.1 gigahertz, so for something that cost me very, very little, there is a decent amount of poke here. And yes, I was lucky because I ordered this before the RAM prices spiked, but there actually are still some really good deals to be found on there, and if you leave the RAM out of your bundle on AliExpress, you can grab used RAM from the place where I got my GPU, which is Sex. Okay, it's officially pronounced Sex, but everyone in the UK really just calls it CEX. And having chatted to a friend who also happened to have a 650-ish watt power supply going spare, which I picked up for £40, I decided on a used 2070 Super as my GPU. I was tempted by a 3050, but as I was pointed out to the benchmarks, you know, the basic stuff I should have done myself, it was clear that the 2070 Super was the way to go. It was £190 with a 5-year warranty. I'll take it. If we get to 2030 and my 2070 dies, I guess I can come to terms with that. And they'll still give me a refund in the next 5 years, or like £8 of whatever the current value is. But yeah, I'll still be doing okay value-wise. But with the power supply, the motherboard combo, and the GPU, the actual stuff that does all the work in the system comes to a total of £289 and 7 pence. Just under £300 for a gaming PC. And yeah, you can find a case for basically no money if you look on eBay or Facebook Marketplace or in your attic or, you know, dumpsters, that kind of stuff. But I guess we're still not quite done yet. I still have to make the case look good and get this gear inside it. So back to the decor. Having built the front, I'm going to take full advantage of the fact that I have a 3D printer, which I was sent for review a little while ago, and the link to it's up there, but this video is absolutely not sponsored. I'm using the Tina 2S, and it's the only 3D printer I've ever used, but it has been a workhorse for me. It's FDM, it's small, it only has like a 10 centimeter cubed kind of build volume, but I've had very few issues using it, like a couple of clogs every so often, and for something like this, and for the Warhammer hobby, it's amazing. If you're kit bashing and you need a specific weapon, perfect. I've printed some thunder hammers just because they weren't in many of the kits. For this though, I made the stained glass looking windows that are on the front. It took less than an hour to print them, and it made quite a big difference, I think. So once everything was built, it was back out into the garden to throw the black base coat onto this thing, and then the painting could begin. I used a combination of burnished gold from the Warhammer range, rust effect paints, and some other metallics, taped out the hazard lines to sponge on the paint, giving it a nice, reasonably rustic look. But I didn't put the window into the sides just so that I could see the graphics card. That is too good of an opportunity to have a little diorama play out inside while we're here. Appropriately enough, I chose some Adeptus Mechanicus Electro Priests to battle some cheeky grots and their runt herd, who also happen to have an electric cattle prod, so I was able to model some nice arcing electricity. And with the nice warm LEDs that are powered off of one of the rear USB ports that cost me about £3 from Poundland, we have a little bit of light on the interior and the front of the case, and we're complete. Honestly, this thing does everything I need. It plays Space Marine 2 at a plenty high enough frame rate for me, and paired up with my Horizon Boom Air projector in the lounge, which, as well as the Johnny Ive designed Harman Kardon soundsticks and subwoofer, I get an amazingly immersive experience. Now, fingers crossed, it will hold up for Dawn of War 4 that comes out later this year. But in true Nerdforge style, let's have a look at the final result! So, if you found me through my Apple channel, welcome. This is where I do my Warhammer stuff as well. I'm going to publish this through both channels. I think you can do it as a collaboration. And if you found me through Warhammer and you would like to hear me ramble about Apple stuff as well, you can hit the subscribe button there for iCaveDave too. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you to my Patreons over at Patreon, and I'll see you in the next one. Want the latest Apple news, leaks and rumours? Subscribe and ring the bell.